Hello there, and welcome to the first official episode of Secrets in Dragon Ball Sparking Zero. I was originally testing whether the whole Bobbity-Spopovich mechanic was present in Sparking Zero. For those who don't know, in Tenkaichi 3, there was a unique mechanic where both Bobbity's grab and Spopovich's ultimate gathered energy to power up Bobbity's own ultimate. And I'm sad to say that this mechanic no longer exists in Sparking Zero. It's most likely because Bobbity's original ultimate, the move that enabled this entire mechanic, was replaced by his electroshock therapy ult. So yeah, now that we got that out of the way, let me show you something I managed to discover while I was testing the whole Bobbity thing. I was randomly flying around the map, you know, messing around with Bobbity, when suddenly, I hit a wall. Well, a rock formation to be specific. I didn't think much of it at first because why should I? It's just a big indestructible formation of rocks. I mean, what's there to think about? But then it happened again. And at this point, I was a bit confused. I was confused because I was able to dash through this exact same rock formation not 20 minutes ago while playing online. I thought Bobbity was maybe glitched or something, so I switched to Spopovich. But to my surprise, it happened again. I then switched to Deborah and tried the same thing, and finally, the formation broke. To celebrate, I did a grab on Gohan, and let's just say I really wasn't expecting them to give such a badass grab to Deborah. Remember in the previous games how there was a power progression mechanic? Like with each transformation, it would take less and less attacks to break characters with super armor. Well, I believe we've discovered an instance of a brand new power progression mechanic. What do Bobbity and Spopovich have in common? Beside the M symbol, of course. They're both relatively weak, right? What if power was a determining factor in whether you could dash through giant rock formations? Based on the previous examples we've seen, the theory does seem plausible. To ensure that this wasn't just a coincidence and to validate the theory, I decided to do some testing. First up, Saibamen. Saibamen are a group of green humanoid creatures cultivated by the Saiyans. Their power level averages between 1,200 and 1,500, making them a perfect fit for this test. I picked up a Saibamen, did a Dragon Dash, and nothing. To be honest, I was actually hoping that would happen since it confirms the theory. Next, I tested Frieza's Soldier, Videl, Mr. Satan, Pan, Roshi, and Kid Goku. They all failed to break the rock. Theory proven true, right? Nope. If only it were that simple. I wanted to see the cutoff point. Like, at what level of power do these characters gain the ability to dash through large obstacles? The goal was to go from the canonically weakest characters to the strongest. I began with Raditz since he has a power level comparable to a Saibaman. However, unlike the Saibaman, Raditz, he broke the formation. Alright, I suppose this settles it. You need to be at least Raditz's level to break these rocks, right? Well, yes and no. You definitely need to be stronger than him, but it's also possible to be stronger and still not be able to break it. This is where the inconsistencies in the theory arise. Yamcha, Tien, Krillin, and Kid Gohan are all characters with power levels above Raditz, yet they still can't break the rocks. And by far, the worst offender would have to be base Teen Gohan. You know, you could maybe argue that the developers based the first group on their early Z versions and their respective power levels when implementing this mechanic. Prior to the arrival of the Saiyans, all the Z fighters were definitely weaker than Raditz. But Teen Gohan? This one just baffles me. I mean, sure, he breaks it the moment he goes Super Saiyan, but what about base? He's so above Raditz in terms of power, it's not even funny. Great Saiyaman is unable to break it as well, but that makes sense. Great Saiyaman Gohan is in a constant state of power suppression since he fights criminals, aka regular people. If we assume that the Z fighters are based on their early Saiyan Saga counterparts, which is a bit of a stretch, but let's just go with it. Then the theory that dashing through giant rock formations being linked to power level would make perfect sense. Everything would fit nicely, no? Unfortunately, base Teen Gohan kind of complicates things. And speaking of whom, I was playing a ranked DP match with Goku, Mid, Trunks, Melee, and Teen Gohan. A solid overall team with a total DP cost of 14 points. Now, remember how in previous games you would unleash an explosive burst of energy whenever you entered max power mode? Well, the same thing is supposed to happen in Sparking Zero, except it didn't. I was attempting to charge my ki to the max, and as soon as my opponent noticed, he quickly used a Z-burst dash to try and stop me. Now, I knew what he was trying to do, but I didn't need to react because my ki was almost fully charged. The moment he dashed toward me, I would enter max power, and the energy burst would knock him back. Unfortunately, things didn't go as planned. So, why didn't he get staggered? Well, my initial thought was that I didn't time it right, but I definitely did. Honestly, given the amount of time I've spent playing Budokai Tenkaichi 3, I had a strong suspicion about what was causing the issue, and I was about to be proven right. You see, in Tenkaichi 3, some of the weaker characters can't stagger their opponents with the energy burst released when entering max power. This mostly applies to OG Dragon Ball characters, as well as some of the weaker characters from the Z portion of the story. With that in mind, along with the rock formation test I had done a few hours earlier, the dots in my head started connecting. I selected base teen Gohan and started to power up to the max, and as expected, my opponent didn't flinch. I did the same thing with Raditz, and you guessed it, Broly was staggered. After conducting a few more tests, I concluded that all the characters that couldn't break those rock formations earlier also failed to stagger their opponents with the max power energy burst. I suppose this confirms the existence of a power level mechanic of sorts. So yeah, for those of you who actively use or plan to use these characters in online, keep all of this in mind. Revenge Counter is a brand new mechanic serving as a sort of get out of jail free card. If your opponent is comboing you and you can't time your other counters right, by double tapping the L1 button, you will tank your opponent's attack and counter with an attack of your own. Simple, right? Well, you're not off the hook just yet. If your opponent has good reflexes, they can use their super perception to catch your counter and hit you with their own. Yeah, a whole lot of countering going on. The thing we want to focus here is the brief cinematic that triggers whenever you counter an opponent's revenge counter using perception. In 90% of the cases, the cinematic will look like this. You intercept your opponent's attack, deliver a cool line, and then smack him in the face. However, not all characters use this animation. There are quite a few fun little unique additions. Whis and Beerus will use a mere finger to stop your attack because they're just that strong. Goldo and Chaozu utilize their telekinesis to freeze you in place. Oh, and Babidi too, but he uses magic rather than telekinesis. Fat Boo and Ribrian share the same animation, most likely because they're a bit on the larger side. Kid Buu has a strange one. For some reason, he bends all the way backward. Mr. Satan can't even perform it because he's too powerful for that. Unfortunately, Giants cannot engage in these counter clashes. Future Gohan does the same thing as everyone, except he only uses a single arm. And the title of the most unique perception counter goes to Kale. Yeah, she just kind of yells at you to go away, but I can't deny that it's one of the most unique perception counters in the game. Super Buu looks really good in this game, especially Buuhan. Unlike BT3, I found him far more enjoyable to play here. In fact, he was one of the first characters I experimented with, and during that experimentation, I stumbled upon a surprising little Easter egg. After firing off his Super Kamehame-huh, Buu does something quite interesting. Yup, he did the thing. If you successfully land a hit on the opponent, Buu will flip them off. This works against any character, not just Vegito. My only gripe is the censoring of his middle finger, but I guess that may be a bit too much for a game like this. In any case, I'm more than glad they decided to include it. Jump attacks are cool. I love jumping around the map and smacking my opponents with them. They weren't particularly useful or anything. I mean, they can stagger the opponent and open up combos, but they were fairly easy to block and punish. I'll be honest, I've played about maybe 40 to 50 matches before I actually got around to making this video, and in those 50 matches, no one, and I do mean no one, was using them. Do people not even know they exist, or they just prefer to not use them because they suck? I don't know. So there I was, running around performing jumping attacks when suddenly A vanish? I jumped again, and sure enough, I did another vanish. This was mind-blowing to me. In Tenkaichi 3, the perfect timing mechanic didn't work on those jumping attacks. And get this, even if you mess up the timing, you can still break their guard. Again, something you couldn't do in previous games. Honestly, the jumping attack mechanic appears to be much more useful. So much so that I can see it having some use in online matches. The distance you can cover with it is so insane that you may be able to catch your opponents off guard. I haven't had the proper chance to test it in actual matches, but there's definitely some potential there. We've known about unique throws for a good while now. Prior to the game's release, we had only seen two: SSJ3 Goku's throw against Fat Buu and Ultimate Gohan's grab on Super Buu. Since the game is still new, there may be more to discover later on. But so far, this is what I got. If you select Z Broly and attempt to do a grab on Super Saiyan Goku mid, this happens. I'm sure most of you caught the reference. It's a nod to the moment when Broly tanked Goku's Kamehame-huh and then grabbed him by the hair. They didn't quite get Goku's facial expression right, as he's laughing here, but his face doesn't reflect that. Now that I think about it, his expression in the movie was a bit off too. It looked like he was under influence. This one's just disrespectful.
Don't underestimate us, Saiyan!
Honestly, I didn't expect this scene to be adapted as a throw, but it works surprisingly well. God of Destruction Toppo's grab on Frieza is straight up brutal.
Trash deserves to be tossed, correct?
Once again, a beautiful adaptation. And the final one I've got is Goku mid versus Frieza. Yeah, the reference is pretty easy to spot. Oh, and all of these unique grabs deal more damage than their regular counterparts. Not by a lot, but it's something. Alright boys, just found a new one. And funnily enough, this one also works against Frieza. Base Broly from Super has a pretty brutal ultimate. The tracking is a bit iffy. I mean, I don't understand why it's not connecting. Goku is literally just standing there. Anyway, once it finally manages to connect, you get something like this. Looks cool, right? Well, what if I told you there's an alternate version of it that triggers under specific conditions? Just make sure your opponent is positioned close to a wall when the ultimate connects. If done correctly, this will happen. Yeah, just like with the grabs. This game also has alternate ultimates. As of now, we don't know how many there are. I would assume there are more, considering the number of unique grabs we currently have, but I suppose time will tell. When performing Solar Flare, your opponent becomes blinded for a few seconds, obviously. However, characters who wear glasses/shades are immune to the blinding effects of Solar Flare.
Solar Flare! What's the matter with you?
Nothing. No reaction whatsoever. Now, Master Roshi is unique. When you hit him with your ultimate move, his outfit and body will be damaged severely. And in the process, his glasses get destroyed as well. Meaning, if we hit him with a Solar Flare, he should be blinded, right?
Solar Flare!
Yup, the game will take into account that his glasses got destroyed during battle and make him vulnerable to Solar Flare. This is how Solar Flare worked in Tenkaichi 3, and many people love this little attention to detail. So, did Sparking Zero do it justice?
Solar Flare!
Looking good so far, Roshi remains unfazed. Let's see what happens after we beat him up. Alright, his shades are gone. Let's see if Solar Flare works.
Over here? Maybe?
This game truly is a worthy sequel. As everyone playing this game knows, you can hold the key button to fire bigger, stronger key blasts. Most of the time, they function similarly, but a few of them have unique effects. For example, Krillin's Destructo Disc, Sword users with their unblockable slash-type key blasts, Babbidi's paralyzing blasts, and so on. The focus in this video will not be on the many versions and effects of those blasts, but rather on the unique animations they use that reference the source material. For instance, Rose Goku Black creates his signature energy sight, which he uses to unleash an unblockable slash-type key blast. It's a clever and creative way to give him a unique charged key blast, and the reference is pretty obvious. However, here's one that's not so obvious, or at least I can figure it out. So there are a lot of Gokus in this game.
You guys better not have been using the Dragon Balls for something sneaky. Hey, I bet you're just oolong or poir playing a trick on me, aren't ya?
I don't think I'm supposed to be here.
But only one specific form has a unique charged ki blast animation. Super Saiyan 3. Goku stretches out his left arm and braces it with his right for support. Once fully charged, he fires a fast, precise ki bullet. As I mentioned, this is unique to SSJ3 Goku. No other form can use it, so it's clearly a reference to something. I went through every single SSJ3 Goku moment in the show. His battles with both Boos, Janemba, Hirudegarn, Beerus, Trunks, Toppo, pretty much everything I could think of. And none of them featured Goku in this pose. Yeah, if anyone could shed some light, I would greatly appreciate it. This is by far the most insane and probably the most lore-accurate implementation of a move I've seen so far in this game. In Sparking Zero, Master Roshi has the Mafuba, or the evil containment wave, as his ultimate, a sealing technique invented by Master Mutato to trap or contain demons. The move requires huge stamina reserves and endurance to perform. If the user does not have enough life force, they will die soon after performing it, in theory at least. In the manga, Roshi explains that the more powerful the opponent, the more energy is required for the seal to work. I want you to keep that statement from Roshi in mind. Although it was originally designed to contain demons, it seemed to be effective against anyone. So let's do a little test in Sparking Zero. I was originally testing whether demon-type characters took more damage from the Mafuba, but unfortunately they don't. However, I did manage to find something even better. I was testing the effects of Mafuba on all forms of Zamasu, and when I finally reached Merged Zamasu, Merged Zamasu took more damage than both Deborah and Cooler. And not only that, Roshi was missing an entire health bar, indicating that the Mafuba took a greater toll on him this time compared to the previous two tests. You see why I told you to remember that statement from Roshi? For example, if you use the Mafuba on Mr. Satan, Roshi will take significantly less damage, but will also deal less damage. However, if you use it on some of the strongest characters in the game, like Jiren, you'll deal over 20k damage, but Roshi will take a lot more damage to his HP as well. Yeah, big fan of this mechanic. It reminds me a bit of the whole Devilman gimmick from BT3. Oh, and Roshi also gets a unique victory cutscene if you manage to finish off your opponent with the Mafuba.
Yeah, I pulled it off!
Mystic Breath is a utility move mostly used by evil demon-type characters. You got Deborah, Evil Boo, Janemba, and Oob. Oob's not evil, but he probably inherited it from Boo. The primary use of Mystic Breath is the negation of super attacks. It can be extremely useful to negate those pesky super attacks with annoying tracking. Again, this is how it worked in Tenkaichi 3. So how does Sparking Zero handle it? Well, it's nearly identical actually. The same characters that had it in the previous games also have it in Sparking Zero. If timed correctly, you can basically negate any beam type attack, same with rush attacks. And I know how much you guys hate those. Just beware of Destructo Disc-like moves because they just shred through Mystic Breath. I believe that Mystic Breath isn't as effective as it was in 3 because super attacks move much faster in this game, requiring you to time those Mystic Breaths very carefully to successfully pull off a negation. I also like that Deborah's Mystic Breath still consists of him spitting literal hellfire. This may not be new to BT3 veterans, but considering the number of records this game is breaking, I know there are many new players coming in. Charging underwater is never a smart move to make. Your key charging speed would decrease by about 50%. The whole idea behind this mechanic is based on the assumption that being underwater disrupts key control. In Tenkaichi 3, androids kind of saw use in this because they were unaffected by being underwater. But in Sparking Zero, no one is safe. Androids, Cooler, and all mechanical type fighters have a reduced recharge rate when in water. Never charge underwater in Sparking Zero. Unless you're this little guy. Staying true to BT3, Sparking Zero still lets Cybermen charge their ki underwater relatively unaffected. I say relatively because they were nerfed for some reason. Cybermen charged about 10% slower underwater compared to BT3. No idea why they changed that. It's not like it makes them broken or anything. So yeah, if you ever see a Cybermen player charging underwater, they're not stupid. They know what they're doing. That's all for this one. If you guys wouldn't mind, I would appreciate it if you could slide me a quick follow on Twitter/X. I'll occasionally be sharing stuff relating to videos and Dragon Ball games in general, but more importantly, it'll help me reach out to YouTube support team if something would ever happen to the channel. So yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.